From advertising to software as a service to data.
Across all of our programs and clients, we've seen a 55 to 65% open rate.
Getting brands authentically integrated into content performs better than TV advertising.
Typical lifespan of an article is about 24 to 36 hours.
If we're reaching out to the right person with the right message and a clear call to action, then it's just a matter of timing.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast, a member of the I Hear Everything Podcast Network. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. Here's the host of the MarTech Podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and today we're going to discuss the future of how we work. Joining us is Drew Moffett, who is the head of marketing at Kumospace, which is a unified communications platform for remote and distributed team that puts all of your people and their communications into one place. And today, Drew and I are going to discuss leveraging AI to scale content marketing. All right, here's the first part of my conversation with Drew Moffett, the head of marketing at Kumospace. Drew, welcome to the MarTech Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Excited to have you here. Excited to talk a little bit about some of the changes in the way we work and specifically how you're marketing in a new category. Let's start off. Tell us a little bit about Kumospace.
Kumospace is engaged in category creation. The nascent category is often referred to as virtual office software or virtual workspace software. It combines the benefits of traditional video conferencing and team chat. So think Zoom and Slack with kind of none of the drawbacks that are typically associated with that. So most of our customers are struggling, and most remote and hybrid teams are struggling with a lack of culture and employee engagement. So they're looking to try and build bonds with their coworkers. By using Kumospace, people sign in 8 hours a day is pretty much the average user, just like you would be in Slack. And you have the benefits of both video, so synchronous communication, and async akin to Slack or team chat. And you're able to quickly move between that. So if you say, hey, can you send that file to me? The person can send you that message. And then as soon as you might reach a point where you want to start collaborating or problem solving with them, you can see their status and maybe go over to them into that virtual space and start talking to them.
That's an interesting concept for a product. And I went on your website, was watching some of the demo videos, and I truly appreciate how the virtual office is focused on design. So you have this like very nice couch that you can sit on next to your employees and have a heart-to-heart chat. I thought that was really sort of a cute element of design and obviously a logical way to try to replace what we're missing in the distributed workforce. You're doing all sorts of interesting things, not only in helping brands connect with their employees, but also trying to market in a new category. Talk to me about some of the ways that you're marketing Kumospace. Specifically, how are you thinking about using artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so a little bit about my career. This is the seventh startup that I'm helping build. I founded two myself. I built 4 corporate-backed ventures, and then you've got Kumospace. So I've done a lot of different marketing tactics. And unfortunately at Kumospace, it's challenging because people aren't aware of a category. So if you think about, if I was marketing, say, Coca-Cola, people already know what soda pop is. Whereas at Kumospace, people don't already know what virtual office software is. So for us, traditional tactics like maybe Instagram ads or LinkedIn ads, you just don't have a long enough impression to capture a person's attention to make those like a very good, viable channel. But as many marketers will find, SEO and content marketing is one of your best channels. So we have been doubling down on that channel and using AI and content creation to really excel at that channel and punch above our weight class.
One of the things that I think is interesting is with a company that isn't something that is a known commodity. Our can of soda versus your can of soda. The underlying assumption is you know what a can of soda is. And so all we have to do is show you the product, highlight maybe some influencers drinking it. Oh, doesn't it make you look fancy? Isn't that great? People don't have that underlying understanding of what your can of soda is. So you need a longer impression. Content marketing, more depth of message. When you think about using AI to scale your content marketing, you mentioned you're trying to punch above your weight class. What does that mean? And how do you make the most out of your content and get that better impression?
So we are probably the third best funded player in the space. There are a couple of companies, one with 2 times our funding, one with 3 times our funding, but we've been able to become the number one player in our space. So that's what I'd really describe as punching above our weight class. There was probably at one point about 20, 25 competitors trying to solve this problem. That's getting whittled down quite quickly. So now our focus is not only just, hey, can we beat companies with several times our our funding, but now it's, can we beat companies with hundreds, 200x kind of revenue perspective? And what I mean by that is like publicly traded companies. So can we beat the Slack? Well, it's actually Salesforce or Google or Microsoft or Zooms of the world. So we need to have an unfair advantage when working with them. So the way that we create content is kind of in 3 folds. So the first piece is like anyone figuring out what you're going to write about. That's either suggestions from our team members. We see if they're there's people searching that topic. And then we also look at competitors. So we've looked at all of our those 25 competitors and seen what kind of content, where they're getting traffic from. And now the focus is looking at the FANG type competitors and seeing where they're getting their web traffic from, as well as there's a tool called Surfer SEO that allows us to plug in an umbrella keyword like video conferencing and see what content should be made underneath that umbrella keyword. That's how we first decide to make the content. Then we feed it into an AI tool. Surfer actually has that. We customize a description of ourselves and we edit a summary. We decide what pieces of content that are currently ranking near the tops of the page that we want to outrank, and we think that people will be quality that would be clicking on that. And then we run that through a human editor, and ultimately we get images added by someone who uploads it to a CMS, and then it goes onto the website. And we do that process that I just described. Now we're going to, in this month, be doing it about 40 times this month, with most of those articles ranging from 1,200 to 3,000 words. Some of those are content is things that are like very image based. So like a memes article, which may be over 100 pages long when it's in a document form. And then by the middle of the summer, we'll probably be doing this at about 100 articles a month.
It's interesting to hear the content volume where when you're using artificial intelligence, in theory, you can scale your content production infinitely. Now, obviously, you're going through people to edit the content. So the artificial intelligence is writing your first draft and you've got a human editor. How do you think about the right volume when you're producing AI content? And how do you balance what is good content as opposed to what is just content that addresses a keyword for a specific search engine?
There's a lot of tools out there, and I've seen a lot of people trying to develop content at scale with AI. And adding the human elements in there has really been the thing that has made us succeed here, because we need to be conscious. For example, if we're creating an article about virtual meeting etiquette, right? We obviously want some paragraphs in that article about Kumo Space, how that's better for running virtual meetings, how the average meeting in Kumo Space is just 9 minutes long. But we still want to preserve that content and have it rank. And we want to ultimately add a brand voice to it. So you have to have those humans. And that does basically remove the ability to scale this from an infinite perspective. So I think the way you described it as a first draft is really accurate. It's a lot easier to edit something than create from anew. So there's where you're getting your speed, making this process a lot faster. I think the other piece to think about is when you're going and looking at topics to write about. The way that I've seen people make a mistake in it is they sit there and they say, okay, I'm going to write an article for every piece of long tail content. And that is not particularly good. You have this competitive advantage because you're using AI, and the way that we're using it and the fact that we're feeding the top ranking articles for that content to it. And that is how it's basically being inspired to write. We see that content doesn't always rank at the top of the page, but it has a higher probability of ranking at the top of the page, even in very competitive keywords, than when we were doing this with the first draft being written by humans. So you don't need to sit there and say 10-person virtual meeting, 15-person virtual meeting, startup virtual meeting, small business virtual meeting. You can probably clump that all into one article with the AI, and it should do well. And if it doesn't do well, we periodically are constantly going back and looking at the content that isn't performing well and content optimizing it. So we're basically taking that same topic that we want to target and we're running it through that process and coming out with a different output and then republishing at that same URL. So we're effectively updating that content for the search engine.
So essentially what you're saying is you've got a content marketing strategy where you're taking the best in class content, feeding it into an SEO tool like SEO Surfer, creating a first draft of a longer format piece of content and publishing with pretty high frequency. How do you think of the marketing mix where you're obviously focused on scaling content and using AI to be able to, in your words, punch above your weight class? I actually think you're in the weight class that you're trying to punch above, but that's okay. Kumo Space is a ground setter for a new industry, but you're competing against bigger companies. How do you think about the marketing mix that you need? You've got this content solution that's allowing you to get traction with these longer, potentially more valuable impressions. What are some of the other marketing channels that you think complement or supplement some of the things that the content marketing strategy might not have?
We have developed a performance-based influencer marketing structure. So the pay structure is in the performance structure, and we have also figured out how to try to scale that pretty well. The way I would liken that is it's like going to a casino and card counting. We're not going to win all the time. On average, we're actually going to lose most of the time. But we are basically taking bets that we believe have a high statistical probability of getting served heavily in a TikTok For You feed or an Instagram Reels feed, right? Basically, pieces of content by third-party creators that are good at going viral. And that allows us to have big spikes in traffic happen. And that is seen all the way down funnel, very high intent. But what we're doing is we're trading a typical ad on a social media platform, whereas if you look at LinkedIn, half a second for half the length of the post is one impression. Whereas a viral video on TikTok, the components that make that video viral, one of the main piece of that algorithm is average watch time. So if I have a minute-long post, then the average watch time is probably 70+%. So you're talking like 40 seconds that we have captured this eyeball for, which is so much greater. It's 80 times what the same impression on LinkedIn is worth. So that allows us to get spikes in traffic. And then the continuous content marketing allows us to support during those moments where you don't have spikes in traffic.
So I understand that you're using influencer marketing instead of trying to use a performance marketing channel to get more quick impressions. You're able to get longer impressions at scale, right? People are creating organic viral content talking about you, and you're basically contrasting the half a second of an impression from an ad and a 40-second TikTok video. How do you think about non-traditional content, right? You mentioned you have blog content. It seems like influencers are creating what I assume is video content. Where do you think about other formats, producing your own video, let's say owned versus earned, obviously podcasts, audio, meeting people in real life? What are some of the other channels that you think are valuable media for a brand like yours?
I've tested at Kumo Space everything other than TV ads and billboard ads and live event, meaning like we organize the event. One of our co-founders speaks at a lot of conferences. So there is value out of that channel, but we don't organize our own conference. Every other tactic under the sun, I think we've tried at least once, and in some cases, multiple times. Because we're engaged in category creation, it's particularly tough for a lot of those traditional ways that you would market to work. We tried to make our own podcast at one point, but the challenge is Kumo Space is probably the prettiest looking. And you were referring earlier to the fact that you can customize the space and there's furniture in it and you can decorate this office. So it's visually very appealing, and it's tough to convey that in other mediums, like even just a cold email, like a typical BDR behavior. People just need to see the video. So the TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, it's short form video. So it's very digestible for people and people can see and they understand. Even as I describe the product now, I imagine some listeners will say, I don't know what that is, and go to the website, kumospace.com, and say, oh, this makes total sense now.
So Drew, you've been the head of marketing at, I think you mentioned 7 startups. Kumo Space is a little bit of a different beast. You're doing category creation. How does this marketing strategy compare and contrast to some of the more traditional marketing strategies that you've implemented with other startups?
There's a lot of more traditional marketing that I was able to employ during other parts of my career, both as a founder of 2 startups and then the person leading the creation of these corporate-backed ventures. So they were in 3 different continents and they were different types of businesses. So traditional, like cold outbound, worked in some of those businesses. Digital ads worked in other of those businesses. The consultancy company called Applico that I was building, that was being contracted by these CEOs of large public companies, targeting those CEOs to engage with us was actually quite hard. The most traditional way of marketing to those people was one of the funnest ways to market. And what we would do is we would send cold emails to these CEOs or C-suites at very large public Fortune 500 companies and invite them to a private dinner to talk about innovation or transformation in their sector, in their industry. So if you think healthcare, then we would just be targeting companies like United Health, 3M, et cetera. So that would be an example of a very traditional marketing tactic of face-to-face interaction and basically business development that was done in person over a dining table.
So if the traditional marketing tactics are trying to get in front of your very defined target market through, I don't know, meeting people over a dining room table, setting up a meeting, just traditional meet, greet sales process, what's the future for Kumo Space? How does this SEO-driven, artificial intelligence-led content strategy help you build the relationships and onboard your customers?
There's a couple pieces to that. So first off, it's a particularly unique business that we're building here. So some of the ways that we onboard customers and some of the ways that we even sell customers are kind of innovative in their own right. So if someone goes to the website today and you click schedule a demo, you are going to actually arrive at the time of that demo in Kumo Space's virtual HQ. And you are going to see our entire team working. And the sales rep is going to give you a tour and in some cases introduce you to actual team members. I get spoken to quite frequently by our sales team when this is happening. So the analogy that I think of every time that you wouldn't think about for a traditional sales business is that that's the same way that WeWork sold people office space. You would walk into a WeWork and they would walk you through and you would see everyone around them doing their work and you could envision yourself being in one of those glass offices next to these people that were working. So from an onboarding and selling perspective, I think we have to basically are having to invent pieces of this playbook. There's the traditional components that exist in how you run a sales process, but the fact that our demos happen in our actual instance of our product, that's unique to us. We're selling virtual real estate, so we had to look for inspiration, not in SaaS, but in real estate.
You know, what comes to my head is that artificial intelligence is making some of the channels that we rely on more efficient. It's allowing the challenger brands to compete on a more even basis. And that's a lot of what Drew has described here is using artificial intelligence to be smart and produce high volumes of quality content, but it's not the entire marketing channel. You need your content strategy. You need some sort of a influencer or performance marketing strategy to take advantage of video. But at the end of the day, they're also trying to do something that is akin to what CPG companies have been doing. It's called cans and hands. The strategy here is we're trying to get longer, deeper impressions because the product needs a little bit more warming up. It's a little complex. It's a little new. It's not very clear to somebody what a virtual office space is. But then once they can pique some interest, boom, they can hand you the can of soda and allow you to taste it, right? It's a little bit of a free sample version of digital meeting rooms as opposed to just trying to get somebody to buy the product up front. And to me, that's what's really innovative about this marketing strategy. It's the use of artificial intelligence. It's an understanding that our product is in category creation. So we need to be a little bit more explicit as opposed to focusing on just volume and repetition. And then once we get somebody interested in products or services, we can demo the product and allow them to get a free taste and hopefully become a customer. And that wraps up this episode of the Martech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Drew Moffett, the head of marketing at Kumo Space. Join us again tomorrow when Drew and I continue our conversation talking about how influencer marketing and SEO can be offensive tools. If you can't wait till our next episode and you'd like to learn more about Drew, you can find a link to his LinkedIn profile in our show notes, or you can visit his company's website, Kumospace, and on kumospace.com, you can book a demo where you could see Drew in his native digital habitat and get a chance to look at Kumo's digital office space. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening to this podcast, head over to martechpod.com where we have summaries of all of our episodes and contact information for our guests. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can even apply to be a guest speaker on the Martech podcast. Of course, you can always reach out on social media. Our handle is MartechPod, MarTechPod, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can contact me directly on LinkedIn. My handle is Ben J. Shap, BenJShap. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we're going to publish an episode every day this year. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.